having me. As we just heard, obviously earlier in the feast, we heard that there was sort of a request for the young ones to give messages or to become more involved. And when the first request was made, I think it was Elder Rafai, he had said that we're waiting for some of the young ones to speak up. And when I first heard that, I said in my head, well, don't hold your breath, it's not going to be me. As time went on through the feast, though, that same comment sort of kept coming into my head. It was just nagging at me. And what I decided that I was going to pray to Yahweh, just to sort of take the responsibility off myself. And so I prayed and I said, okay, Yahweh, I'll make a deal with you. If you will give me a new way of understanding something, if you give me an insight that I don't have right now, then I will go and I will give a message. Now, to be completely honest, Elder Morodic had said earlier in the week, he had said something to the effect of, how could Yahweh call such a wicked man as himself? I look at myself as being a wicked man. And so, when I had made the prayer, I wasn't necessarily expecting there to be an answer. So I prayed, and I said, okay, Yahweh, I'll make this deal with you. If you give me a message, I'll go forth and I'll give it. I didn't expect it to be answered, so I turn over to go to sleep. As soon as I turn over, it hits me. And the first thing I said was, nah, it's a coincidence. It's not really Yahweh speaking. It's just my own brain doing this. If it's really Yahweh, what he'll do is he'll give me a second witness, or he'll show me something tomorrow. It's not really Yahweh. Well, this happened at about 12 o'clock Tuesday night, and I couldn't go to sleep until 2 o'clock. I was up for 2 hours with these thoughts going through my mind and everything just adding up, and so I said, you know what? Obviously, I'm wrong. This is Yahweh. I got up, wrote down the message, and then I went back and I said, okay, Yahweh, you answered that prayer. And so I prayed and I said, thank you for answering that prayer. Now will you please tell me why you give something like that to a wicked man like me? And then there was no answer, of course. So, the title of today's message is The Lost Bones. I was hoping to use this board, but this looks like a lot of time and energy went into this, so we'll leave that alone. The human body, when you are an adult, is said to have 206 bones in the human body. Now, when you're an infant, you're said to have 300 bones. So, something happens between the time of being an infant and being an adult. Hence the title, The Lost Bones. Now here's the thing. There are 2 questions that should come into the human mind when you hear of this. When you first figure out that an adult has 206 bones on average and an infant has 300. First question is, how many bones were lost? Anybody want to do the math? How many bones have we lost? 94 bones were lost. The other question is, why? Why were the bones lost? Why? Well, to clear things up a bit, the bones aren't actually lost, if you will. You don't really start to lose bones or bone mass until after you've hit a particular age if you're not taking care of your body. But as you're growing up, what's actually happening is the bones are fusing. Some of the bones begin to fuse together, therefore you're going to have less joints. And the reason for this fusing is to make sure that the body becomes more stable. Your skeleton gives you your structure, and as those bones fuse, your structure becomes more stable, okay? Now here's the thing. Something that has a lot of moving parts is not as durable as something that doesn't have as many moving parts. If you think about it, if you have some trinket or machine that has a lot of joints, a lot of different things you can move around, it's very easy to break. Now if you have just a big brick or something that doesn't have a lot of moving parts, it doesn't break as easily. So this happens to the human body. As we're growing older, joints are lost in a sense. Some of the bones begin to fuse together, and that gives the adult body a more stable structure. Now, here's something about the human body. The adult bones are actually estimated to be 5 times stronger than steel, pound for pound. Pound for pound, your adult bones are 5 times stronger than steel. Now that's saying something. Now, I'm bringing all this up because Yahweh has created our bodies, and there's nothing that Yahweh does that doesn't have a purpose. There's nothing that Yahweh does that doesn't have a pattern. So if we're able to look at the human body, in a sense we'll be able to understand, in some ways, parts of Yahweh's plan in a deeper sense. Now, obviously I said that these bones are lost, in a sense, but something has to be lost to ensure that successful growth. If you didn't lose those bones, if those bones didn't fuse, you would be extremely vulnerable. You wouldn't be as durable. I have these 2 action figure toys. One of them is a Spider-Man toy, and it's got all these great joints. When I first got it, it can move its elbows, it can move its wrist, its hand, it can do all these wonderful things. And then I had a Robin toy, and the Robin toy, he can only move here and he can only move here. He can't really do anything. Well, the Spider-Man toy, been busted up in the arm, I had to tape that back together, it busted in the leg, got to glue that back together. The Robin toy, you can chuck it, run it over, do all sorts of stuff, and it's fine. It's fine. Don't have to do a single thing to it because there's not as many moving parts. Well, Yahweh does the same thing to us. Now, on a spiritual sense, okay, because physically, those bones have to be quote-unquote lost to ensure a stable structure in the adult human. Spiritually, there are things that we have to lose, things that we have to give up to become spiritually stable. Okay? So I want us to go to our first scripture in 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians 13. In verse 11, it says, "When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things." Something was put away from the time that he was a child to the time that he became a man. Well, look at the bow scenario. There's something that's put away, something that's changed from the time of being a child to the time of being an adult man. Spiritually, it's telling us that we're all spiritual babies at some point in our lives. We might not all be right now, but at some point in our lives, we're all spiritual children, spiritual babies. And therefore, we are fragile. We're very fragile. When we grow up spiritually, because growing up physically is not growing up spiritually. You can be 75 years old, and still be a spiritual child. You can be 12 years old and be a spiritual adult. If you remember Yeshua, I believe, one of the feasts, I think he was probably about 12 years old, and he was over there with the elders, speaking to them, trying to learn from them. He was not spiritually a child. He was developed spiritually, but he was in a child's body. Well, the same thing here. If we are spiritually children, we spiritually have those 300 bones. Something has to happen. We can't stay in that state in which we are spiritually vulnerable forever. If you look at a baby, you got to hold it the right way. You got to pick it up the right way. You better not drop it. You got to take very careful care of it. When you're an adult, you don't got to worry about those things because you're more durable. We have to be able to become spiritual adults, but to do that, there are things that we have to lose. There are bones that have to be fused in order for this to happen. If you can go over to Mark chapter 8. Mark chapter 8 and verse 35. It says here, "Whoever will save his life will lose it." I want us to think of saving that life as holding on to what you are. Think back to the baby analogy. If you could choose, if you had the consciousness and the power to choose as an infant whether or not you were going to lose 94 bones, what would you do? If someone came to you and said, "Okay, infant, from today until the time that you're about 25, you're going to lose 94 bones, but we'll give you the choice. You're going to lose the bones or not. You're going to say, no, I don't want to lose bones. What are you talking about? I don't want to do that. Okay, well, let's say that there's an individual that had some genetic issue in which they kept all 300 bones until their adulthood. That'd be a very brittle person. It'd be very easy to break them, very easy to hurt them. They'd be just about as easy to hurt as an infant. This is what it's saying. If you're going to save your life, if you're going to hold on to your 300 bones, if you're going to hold on to your spiritual infanthood, you're going to lose your life. Not that life, but your real life. Now, it goes on, it says, okay, whoever will lose his life for my sake and for the message, the same will save it. The scripture is talking about two different types of life. It's talking about our life, the life that we think that we should have, and it's also talking about the true life that Yahweh gives us. If you save the life that you think you have, if you save your 300 bones, because having 94 less doesn't sound like a very good deal to me, okay? If you save that, then you lose that true life that Yahweh has to give you. You lose that true spiritual life that Yahweh has for you later. You're going to lose that future spiritual stability that Yahweh has for you. But if you lose those things, if you give it up for the sake of the message, for the sake of Yahweh, then you save your true life. You receive your true life. Think about what happens in the physical sense. When those bones are gone, they're not really gone, but when they fuse, and now you have 206 instead of 300, you have received physical stability, physical strength. Yahweh does the same thing for us spiritually. When we give up certain things, we are actually receiving strength. We're receiving spiritual stability. We're not as easily moved. We're not as easy to break spiritually. It's the exact same concept. I have another scripture for us in Colossians. Okay? Colossians 26. Never mind. Colossians 3, not 26. It's on page 926 in the book of Yahweh. Colossians 3, verse 5. This tells us some of the things that we have to lose in order to receive that spiritual stability. Okay? Verse 5 of chapter 3 in Colossians, it says, and the subheading here in the book of Yahweh is, put off the old man with his practices. It says, therefore, put to death the evil passions lurking in your members which are on the earth. Fornication, uncleanness, passions, unholy desires, and all greed and covetousness, which are idolatry. It is on account of these things the wrath of Yahweh is coming upon the children of disobedience, among which you also once walked when you lived in them. Okay? Now, it says, but now you must also put away all these from your mouth: anger, rage, malice, blasphemy, and filthy language. This is just an example. The scripture has several different places in which it talks about things that you have to put away from you. This is just one scripture that is telling us things we have to get rid of. Now, this is the thing. We're all born with these things. All of us were born in a state in which we were not perfect. All of us were born spiritually unstable, just like all of us were born with 300 bones. Do we all have 300 bones now? No. Do we all have all of these bad things now? No. Each of us is working to a place in which we can become spiritual adults. We're working towards a place where we will have, in a sense, 206 bones instead of 300. We're working towards a place where we will be able to stand against the different elements that come against us. If you keep these things, if you stay in that infant state, how do you stand up against those beings? The scripture says we fight against not flesh and blood, but principalities and powers in high places. How do you stand against them if you're still an infant? How do you stand against them if you still have those 300 bones in a sense? How do you do it? How do you stand against them if you are still vulnerable spiritually? You can't do it. You can't do it. Now, if you go forth further to verse 12, okay? Now, at the beginning, the title was The Lost Bones, but I think we showed that the bones are not actually lost, but the individual is transformed, in a sense. They're transformed because these bones begin to fuse. So the individual is transformed. Now, for the person that doesn't understand, for the person that doesn't have the knowledge, if you just tell them, you had 300 bones, now you have 206, they think that you've lost something. You haven't really lost. A lot of times people in the world, they look at someone that has a spiritual lifestyle or someone that has given up the worldly lifestyle and they say, boy, did you lose out. You don't get to party on Fridays anymore. You don't get to, drink all this anymore. You don't get to go to the strip club anymore. Dude, you don't smoke cocaine anymore. Bro, you have missed out. You're losing. You're not losing. You didn't lose anything. If anything, you're gaining. But you're not gaining in the concrete sense of gaining. When you lose those 94 bones, quote unquote, yeah, you have less bones, but what have you gained? You've gained strength. You've gained durability. You're gaining. It looks like you're losing to the person that doesn't understand, but you're gaining. When you start putting away the things of the world, to the world it looks like you're losing. You're not having fun. You don't get to go and play soccer on Saturdays anymore. That's not fun. It looks like you're losing. But instead you're actually gaining something. So in verse 12 here, it says, therefore, as the elect of Yahweh, holy and beloved, put on compassion. These are things that you have to gain. Kindness, humbleness of mind, meekness, long-suffering, being patient with one another and forgiving one another. If anyone has a complaint against another, just as the Messiah forgave you, so you also must forgive. And above all these things, put on love, which is the bond of perfection. And let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to which you are also called into one body, and be thankful. This is the transformation that we take on when we become spiritual adults. It looks to the person that doesn't know that we've lost something, but we have truly gained something far greater than the 300 bones and all the fun that we could have had before. We've actually gained something. Now, my last point that I want to make here, okay? We said that the difference between the 300 and the 206 was 94. And 94 is comprised of the number 9 and the number 4, correct? Okay. What do those two numbers have in common? 9 and 4. What do those two numbers have in common?
What? 8 up to 13.
That's not where I was going with it, but they're both perfect squares. The square root of 9 is 3. The square root of 4 is 2. Now, Yahweh gives meaning to the numbers. The number 3 means separation. The number 2 is a house. Now, how does this add up into the rest of this message? Number 3, that is telling us you have to separate yourself from the 300 bones you had before. You have to separate yourself from the spiritual weaknesses you had before. And you separate yourself into what? 2, a house. It's also telling us this. If it's talking about a house, we all know Yahweh builds a house. It's not a physical house, it's not made with hands, but he builds a house. If any human was to build a house, what would they use? What materials would they use? Would they use materials that break easily? Or would they use materials that are going to give the house a stable structure? It's telling us in order to become part of Yahweh's house, we have to have a stable spiritual structure. He's not going to take the brittle thing that breaks easily and make it and use it to make his house. He's not going to do that. He's going to take something that is strong in spirit, something that is stable in spirit. He's going to use that thing to build his house. So this message is about, okay? What this message is about is separating ourselves from our weakness that we are all born with. That's 300 bones. You're born with them, and they make you weak. They make you fragile. You have to transform yourself to where you no longer have those weaknesses. You have to transform yourself to where your structure is one that is strong, to where your spiritual structure can be put into Yahweh's house. But you can't do that if you hold on to the weaknesses that you came to the world with. You can't do it. You can't hold on to those 300 bones and go play football. It ain't gonna happen. If you want to stay in a wheelchair all your life, you can keep those bones. But if you want to be part of Yahweh's house, if you want to contribute to the structure of Yahweh's house, you can't hold on to the weaknesses you came into this world with. You've got to give those things up. You have to separate yourself from your weakness and separate yourself into what Yahweh has for you. And that's why I say it.